Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Extra Point here on ESPN 1600. I'm your host, Roland Rainey, and as always, I'm joined with Jeremy Coleman out of Indiana, Justice Gordon from New York, and Robert Parker from New Jersey. And ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe it. The season has come to an end. And what an end that we had. We now have a guy who's going to go down. I mean, he was already going to go down in history, but he has definitely cemented himself as the all-time great, and that is Tom Brady, who was the Super Bowl 55 MVP, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl champions over the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 31-9. And if you watch that game, there were so many intricate parts that I think a lot of folks were not anticipating. The one specific one is how Patrick Mahomes was on the run nearly the entire game. But he also didn't look very mobile at times, and it made you really wonder about that toe. So our colleagues here, Jeremy, Justice, and Robert, had some very interesting projections going into this game. So let's do a quick recap. We had Jeremy picking the Kansas City Chiefs. We had Justice picking the Kansas City Chiefs. And we had Robert and myself picking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I have to do it. We have to go with the winners first. So Robert, what do you think? Everything that you talk about, did you see it come to fruition on that football field?
Yeah, Roland, I tell you what, everything that we predicted, in the previous pod episode came to fruition. We talked about Todd Bowles and the defense. We talked about Vita Vea. We talked about JPP and Shaquille Barrett getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And that's pretty much what happened throughout the whole entire game. Patrick Mahomes was on the run. And, they really struggled to kind of get some offense going because of that defensive pressure that Todd Bowles had out there for him.
So I 100% agree. And we actually talked about that, about how that defense was going to be unleashed. But one of the things I can tell you I still had lingering in my head was with those speedy edge rushers, was Mahomes going to be able to utilize his skill set to get outside the pocket and get the ball deep downfield? So, Jeremy, why wasn't they effective in getting the ball deep down the field?
Well, part of the the deep passing game is you got to have time to throw the ball deep. Like Robert said, Shaquille Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul off the edges were giving the Kansas City offensive tackles trouble all night long. That's one area where I will say that I was wrong to a degree. I thought with 2 weeks practice and some scheme that Kansas City would handle that a little bit better, but they didn't at all. They looked overwhelmed out there, and that, definitely led to the inconsistency in the passing game that you're so used to seeing out of the Kansas City Chiefs. They did a great job on Tampa Bay did a great job on defense, keeping everything in front of them, just like Robert said they should. That's exactly what they did. They tackled well. They didn't allow yards after the catch. They made it tough on Travis Kelce, and he had a few bad drops, when Mahomes was able to pull magic and get the ball away. And even some of the ridiculous throws that he had in this game. I mean, you watch the audio from the Super Bowl, even the Tampa Bay wide receivers were saying the guy's a magician. I think it was Godwin on the sideline was like, how did he get that off? The dude's a magician. So, I mean, Mahomes is still the player I think who he is, but give Tampa Bay all the credit. They came in, had a great game plan. They executed it flawlessly. And the old Tom Brady to Rob Gronkowski connection sure started off the game well for Tampa Bay with a big bang with 2 touchdowns.
So, Justice, what caught you off guard? Because in your prediction, you really mentioned that speed was going to be a part of their winning recipe. Did you see that speed, or what happened in your opinion?
Yeah, Roland, I saw the speed, but I saw Todd Bowles create a game plan to contain it. You know, going into this week, you know, I mentioned going back and forth on this. Uh, I really thought in the back of my head the Bucks would come out on this last Sunday, but I was thinking back to last year and how I bet on that San Francisco defense against Patrick Mahomes, and I bet against him. And this year, I kind of went with Patrick Mahomes, but like me and Jeremy were wrong on this one. This was just the MVP of this game was Todd Bowles. This was just a perfect game plan. You know, I went into this week, you know, thinking about the two tackles that were missing. I was thinking about, you know, Todd Bowles and that Tampa Bay team getting a fresh look at this team in week 12, I believe it was. So they had that film to lean back on. And I was dead wrong about Tyreek Hill. They absolutely blanketed him. That was a big shocker to me. I thought he'd be able to get loose. He actually dropped a touchdown pass. It was a tough catch, but it was still catchable, which was something to kind of look back on. But I think Jeremy kind of nailed it a little bit. You know, the drop passes, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill. I think Robinson dropped the touchdown. This was just a perfect recipe for Tampa Bay. And with Mahomes with that bum ankle, you know, the drop passes, nothing was going their way. And I got to give all the credit to Tampa Bay, just like Jeremy said.
So let's go back to, before we go back to Mahomes, let's talk about Tyreek Hill. Because one of the things that Jeremy mentioned in his prediction is he loves how Andy Reid goes into halftime and makes the necessary adjustments. And, you know, Kansas City will come out and they will start, you know, gunning and slinging. And you oftentimes see Tyreek break away during that time frame, oftentimes in the second half. So when you look at how Tampa Bay's defense locked him down, what do you think was missing from whatever halftime adjustments that they made, or was Coach Bowles' scheme just that great to take Tyreek totally out of the game?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is that when you've watched the Kansas City offense these last 2 years with Mahomes, everything breaks down into timing. They had no timing throughout the entire game because of the type of pressure they were getting from that Tampa Bay front four, and then the linebackers too, Levante David and Devin White. I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that they couldn't get any timing down. There was no sense of timing. You know, you guys were just getting beat off the snap. And you can't do all the nice little trickeration plays when your base plays aren't working either.
Yeah, you know, to your point, when the defense is able to take away your timing and neutralize your speed, which your offense is predicated on, you know, it does make for a long day. So with that in mind, Robert, do you think Coach Bowles has now laid the blueprint for every NFL team out there, that when you're going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, this is how you neutralize Patrick Mahomes? Or do you think this was just a game of circumstance, meaning because Patrick Mahomes had a pretty bad turf toe along with some ankle issues, that he was not able to be the guy that we know him to be?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, Roland, if you ask me. I tell you what, we all knew Patrick Mahomes wasn't healthy. He wasn't a fully 100%. But, hey, it's the Super Bowl. How many players are 100% at that, you know, particular juncture in a year? So if you're in the Super Bowl, I think you're healthy enough to play. So Patrick Mahomes, he'll never, you know, say that he wasn't 100%. He's just going to be the competitor that he is. But, you know, ultimately that toe injury was pretty significant. And at the end of the day, you can't discount the two offensive tackles that went down. You know, those not having those two offensive tackles actually, you know, kind of helped Todd Bowles in that defensive scheme that they were cooking up, because it actually got pressure on Patrick Mahomes with the front four instead of bringing the blitz. But I tell you what, Todd Bowles was cooking in that game. I saw Todd Bowles bring a corner blitz, and I was just like, oh, yeah, Tampa Bay is definitely going to win now. When have you seen teams bring corner blitzes on Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs? Never. If you ask me, because of the speed that we're talking about in Tyreek Hill, the Miko Hardmans, and the Marcus Robinsons on the outside. So that just goes to show you that this offensive line compared with, Patrick Mahomes and his injury and the energy that Tampa Bay just came out on defense was a recipe for success for Tampa Bay, and that's why they were victorious.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Robert, especially for all the fans listening in. If you had the ability to DVR this game or can go on YouTube or wherever and re-watch the Super Bowl, there's something unique that Coach Bowles did that even shocked me. He almost used his corners and edge rushers in a very interchangeable dynamic. So when the edge rushers weren't going after Mahomes, it was actually the corners and then him dropping the edge rushers out into the flat. When they were sending in at times the edge rushers, they were taking the linebackers and dropping them back or doing an interexchange of those positions. He had a dynamic in the front seven that included cornerbacks that probably hasn't been seen throughout the entire season. That was one hell of a play scheme and a game plan going in. Now, going back to Kansas City, to Jeremy's point earlier, there was a lot of players who just weren't catching the ball. I mean, Kelsey just looked out of sync. Even the running game at times just did not look in sync. And then on top of it, Andy Reid's play calling did not look in sync. So was this just a bad day for Kansas City? What do you think, Justice? Was Andy on his game? Was he on top of his game for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think Andy Reid called his normal game plan. I just think, you mentioned the run game. Levante David and Devin White, they shut that down quick. They were all over the field. They really helped contain that run game and made them run. And the loss of the two tackles, that was a big issue in itself. Just like Jeremy said, a big part of this Kansas City Chiefs offense is sitting back and having time for those speedsters to get downfield, and they just didn't have it. And that was one of the big problems that led to them not scoring a touchdown in this game. Todd Bowles called that, soft cover 2 defense to keep them contained. They couldn't get the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands. And, that's why the offense kind of looked out of sync and looked like nothing was working, because Patrick Mahomes had no time and they shut down the run game and made them one-dimensional. So, like you mentioned, Roland, I think it's a little bit of both. It was the perfect game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs, but there was also so many things that went against the Chiefs. The penalties, just the drop balls that, aren't what this team usually does. It was just a terrible night for this team altogether. And, while it was the perfect game plan, I think the Kansas City Chiefs will learn from this and come back next season on fire.
So you mentioned something, and for the fans listening in, I have to take it there, and let's do it right now. Immediately after the Super Bowl, there were social media conjectures, there were memes, there were all types of posts about the play, not of the players, but of the referees. So let's talk about these referees. They were flag happy in the first half. There's a lot of PIs that were called that some would argue shouldn't have been called. Robert, do you believe the referees were too heavy-handed in the Super Bowl in the first half?
Yes. I tell you what, anytime you make it to a Super Bowl, you want to see a good, clean game, but at the end of the day, you kind of want to see the players kind of compete and go after each other. You don't want to see the game coming down to the referees. And I tell you what, it was a lot of calls that, was kind of questionable, but the one particular call that was questionable for me was, the pass interference in the red zone with the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, and Mike Evans when they're kind of locked up with each other. It was kind of, Mike Evans is a physical wide receiver that wants to kind of get physical at the point of attack. And Tyrann Mathieu is a physical, hybrid safety corner type of player too. So you kind of let those guys battle it out. And, it just seems like the ref was going to call a flag on that particular route no matter what happened. So you kind of want to see the referee pick that one up. But all the other ones kind of questionable, but I wasn't so mad at those in particular, but just definitely the one with Mike Evans and Tyrann Mathieu.
What's your thoughts on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'd say that's the most glaring one that people are going to remember from this game, because that effectively put the ball at the one, and one play later, New England scores to go up 21-6, I believe. That's a big deal heading into halftime. That was a huge momentum type changing play. Like Robert said, you want to see these guys be able to go after each other and play and pit against each other, mano a mano. And I felt like the refs were very, heavy-handed on a few times. I felt like there were definitely a few times, that the calls were very ticky-tack. They could have kept the flag in their pants. You just don't want to see the refs determine the outcome of a game. I think we've all seen games where the refs are way too flag happy and the game has no rhythm and all that. And this is supposed to be the Super Bowl, the culmination of an entire football season that a lot of people never thought was going to happen. And I just think it gave Tampa Bay a big advantage in the first half to a point where, not that Kansas City couldn't come back from it, but it was just going to be a daunting task to do that. They had been flagged for 5 or 6 costly penalties in that first half that kept extending the Tampa Bay drives. And it was just like, man, another chance to get off the field taken away. A few of those are on them, but I definitely don't think a few of them were either.
Something I want to share with you all, and I want to talk about this because I haven't seen it in a NFL game in quite some time. Let me throw out a couple of stats. Total number of first downs by each team. Kansas City, 22. Tampa Bay, 26. Total yardage. Kansas City, 350. Tampa Bay, 340. Total plays. Kansas City, 69. Tampa Bay, 63. Passing yards. Kansas City, 243. Tampa Bay, only 195. Rushing yards. Kansas City, 107. Tampa Bay, 145. There is one stat that changes it all. Kansas City, 2 turnovers by interceptions. Tampa Bay, 0. When you look at these stats, one could argue like, wow, that's a pretty even kill game. But yet the score is 31-9, 2 interceptions, costly penalties, put Tampa Bay in some great positions to go ahead and score, especially before halftime. And here we are with Tampa Bay as the Super Bowl champs. What do you think about those stats, Justice?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything left to be said. You hit it on the head. The penalties that Tampa Bay was able to capitalize on, and the turnovers, the 2 picks. Robert hit it on the head too. The refs were, kind of ticky tacky. I didn't like some of the calls. Jeremy nailed it. You got to let them play. Robert mentioned the Honey Badger pass interference in the end zone. That's definitely one I don't agree with. But the one that set that up was the Bashard Breeland pass interference to Mike Evans down the sideline. He tripped over his shoe. That wasn't really a pass interference to me. I would love to see that one let go, but I got to give that up to Tom Brady. He's done that his entire career. 20 seconds left in the half. Why not throw it up? See if you can get that call. But if I was making that call, I would have let that one go. But yeah, you nailed it on the head. The penalties. The one that really comes back with me, that really resonates with me, is that Tyrann Mathieu pick that got called back for defensive holding. These chief DBs, they need help. To quote Shannon Sharp, an APB needs to be put out. The National Guard needs to be put out for these guys because they need Rob Gronkowski abused them. They got abused. Mike Evans. It was a sad thing to see. Seeing Pat Pete hit free agency. seeing a guy like Asante Samuel in the draft, I think the Chiefs need to go all in on the secondary. They need to get Tyrann Mathieu refired up, and they need to really revamp their secondary because it cost them this game.
I tell you what, this was one for the ages. And, when it's all said and done, Tom Brady walks away with his 10th Super Bowl appearance, 7 Super Bowl titles. In my humble opinion, probably the likes of something that we'll never see again. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening in to the Extra Point here on ESPN 1600. I'm your host, Roland Rainey, and we've been talking about Super Bowl 55. Now, one of the things that I had the great opportunity of doing is participating in the post-game press conference and having the opportunity to interview one of the Super Bowl champions, and that is Antoine Winfield. So I want to take the opportunity to play a portion of that interview. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Antoine Winfield, Super Bowl champion safety for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And as he mentioned, the coaches put them in a great position to become victorious. And I think we all saw exactly what that defense did. Now, it was a little funny. He mentioned earlier in the interview why he threw up the peace sign to Tyreek Hill. And if everyone remember when they played Kansas City earlier in the season, Tyreek, before he scored a touchdown, turned around, did a backwards flip into the end zone, and threw the peace sign up right in front of Anton. So that was his way of getting back to him. And he will be one to admit he could not wait to throw the peace sign back up to Tyreek Hill. So as we look at this Super Bowl victory, guys, I think one of the biggest items that I'm curious about is what is going to happen now in the offseason. I think, to Justice's point, Kansas City Chiefs, they have to address some of the issues that they have in the secondary. In the Tampa Bay side of the house, it's all about just keeping the current talent. There's a couple of free agents coming up, so it's about renegotiating contracts and getting folks to stay. So I don't know, guys. What do you think? What are some of the critical pieces in the offseason to both of these teams?
Well, I'll say really quickly for Kansas City, they're going to have to make a decision at left tackle. With Eric Fisher tearing his Achilles this late into the year, there's a very good possibility he will not be ready for, regular season work coming next year. That is a tough injury for an offensive lineman, especially at left tackle, to come back from. That was already going to be an interesting conversation whether they were going to be able to afford his $12 million cap hit this year. And with the cap not expected to be very high, I think this kind of accelerates their thinking where they may have to take a left tackle early in the draft or try to sign one in free agency.
Yeah, you mentioned offseason acquisitions and keeping players around, and I think of Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a big part of that offense. He can play inside. He can play outside. He can make the big plays over the top, contested catches. He can do it all. Bruce Arians mentioned it in the Super Bowl parade. He said he wants to keep him here. I'm going to keep it PG. That's pretty much what he said. But, I think about, Mike Evans coming out and saying he'd take a pay cut to keep some players around. And I thought of Chris Godwin. I think that could be a player they look to take away from Mike Evans a little bit to keep him around. So I think Chris Godwin is a player to watch this offseason.
Yeah, I think Jeremy hit the nail on the head in regards to, the Kansas City offensive line. I think, Justin mentioned it earlier, talking about, that secondary that, just played horrible in the Super Bowl. And we talked about Kansas City late in the year on previous pods as far as, flipping the switch on and flipping the switch off. And, Tampa Bay actually caught them on a day where they actually had the switch flipped off. So with that being said, I think they have to retool the offensive line position and keep Patrick Mahomes upright. You don't want to see him running. I think Next Gen Stats had a stat out there that he ran for 495 yards. And that's a lot of yards, not rushing yards. That's just 495 yards, just running away from pressure and everything like that. So they definitely have to retool this offensive line in the off season.
To jump in real quick, I just want to come back on Robert's comment about the Kansas City Chiefs flipping the lights on and flipping them off. They flipped them on, but the light bulb was out. Todd Bowles shut that out. There was just nothing going on for them.
Oh, you heard it right here on the extra point. Justice Gordon with the quip. The lights were on, but the light bulb was off, right? Wow. Okay. That's pretty interesting there. That's a good one. I tell you, that was something that I think in the offseason, to everything that all of you have already said, they have to go back and do some retooling. Now, minor tweaks here and there.